tranquil landscape of Lamdong province, the French colonial territory of Cochin, China, 1938. Cochin, China is part of the French Empire in the east, a colony they call Indochine. Indochina is formed by Laos and Cambodia in the west, and the eastern territories of Tonkin, Annam, and Cochin China, the ancient kingdom of Vietnam. Fiercely independent, after successfully resisting invasions from China for centuries, the native peoples have been living under French rule 50 years. Now, disguised by the timeless serenity of their countryside, these outwardly placid people are building powerful independence movements. Almost 40 years of desperate struggle and appalling suffering will follow. Using their own first-hand accounts and previously unseen film shot entirely in color, this is their story. The Northwest Frontier, the gateway to Asia, 1937. Peshawar, the last outpost of the British Empire in India. As part of their grand tour, adventurers and amateur cinematographers Edward de Rothschild and Peter Traherne are traveling through the vast and ancient lands of Asia. They record these unique images of more than 70 years ago on 16mm film. They have never been broadcast before. Saigon, 11th of November, 1938, the 20th anniversary of Armistice Day. French colonial forces march to honor the dead of the Great War. It is only 2 decades since the end of a war that was supposed to end all wars, during which France suffered over 4 million casualties. Saigon journalist Nguyen Lacroix, a bystander.
The troops were very impressive in their fine uniforms. Their weapons and medals shone in the bright sunlight. There was lots of cheering, but most of the people there had a lot to gain from the French occupation. In the countryside, it was different.
In less than a year, the world will once more be engulfed in global conflict.
We were told that a war was coming in Europe. We hoped that would mean the French would leave us in peace.
Saigon has all the trappings of the colonial good life. But the French authorities treat dissent ruthlessly. Ngo Vinh Long, raised in the Mekong Delta in the south of the country, remembers his childhood under French rule.
The French made routine patrols and killed many Vietnamese. They dumped their bodies in the river. Every time I went down to get water, I saw floating corpses. I hated the French. My father said, we shouldn't hate the French, only French colonial policy.
The remote villages in the mountains and jungles are fertile recruiting grounds for the nationalist cause. Long's father is active in the struggle.
My father was very idealistic. He gave most of his land to the peasants in his village in the north and moved to the Mekong Delta as a school teacher. He was horribly tortured by the French. They bashed his head and broke his ribs, puncturing his lungs. Doctors said he only had a week to live, but he refused to die.
Fort Puplek, a French fortification in the Krai district of southeast Cambodia, 1938. It has been built to keep at bay the local people, a tribe the French call Le Moi Sauvage, the wild Moi. The Western colonial powers espouse the virtues of liberal democracy, so many nationalist movements look to communism for ideological support, especially the Marxist-Leninism of the Soviet Union. An OSS training camp in Burma at the end of the war. Events in Asia are developing rapidly. Ho Chi Minh's prediction proves to be accurate. In March 1945, the Japanese army overthrows the French administration and replaces it with a puppet government under Bao Dai, the Emperor of Annam. August 25th, Rangoon, Burma. Lieutenant General Takata Numata arrives from Saigon to surrender Japan's Southern Army to the Allies, following Emperor Hirohito's order that Japan endures the unendurable and accepts defeat. Ho Chi Minh.
This is a great advance in the struggle waged for nearly a century by our people. The National Liberation Committee is now our provisional government. Unite around it and see to it that its policies and orders are carried out throughout the country.
As the Viet Minh moves to take control of the country, Allied troops arrive, Chinese nationalists in the north and British in the south. Saigon, September 6th. Allied prisoners of war and French internees are released by the British. General Gracie, commander of British forces, allows the Japanese to retain their weapons to help him keep order. With a revolutionary government in control in many parts of the country, reprisals begin against those who are thought to have collaborated with the French and Japanese. Ngo Yen Xuan Phong, who will later become a senior diplomat, describes what happened to his family.
Of course, they imprisoned all the landowners. Anyone who had any kind of function under French rule. My grandfather was jailed because he was a village chief. Luckily, my uncle was at school with the Viet Minh leader and went to see him. He said, "Why did you put my father in jail? He is harmless. He hasn't done anything cruel." So he was released after a few days.
Phong's grandfather is one of the lucky ones. Many are killed as the Viet Minh deals ruthlessly with those they call collaborators. Vietnamese fights Vietnamese for the first time. Independence is fleeting. Within months, with British and American support, French forces return and take control in the south as the Viet Minh are disarmed. In the north, Ho Chi Minh's forces are unable to prevent lawlessness by the Chinese Nationalist Army. He has little choice but to ask the French to return to restore order. Once again, Indochina is ruled from Paris. Although the Americans are sympathetic to the cause of Vietnamese nationalism, the post-war ideological chasm between the democracies of the West and the communism of the Soviet Union dooms Ho Chi Minh's revolutionary government to failure. The Viet Minh melt away into the countryside, and the situation rapidly deteriorates into what will be called the First Indochina War. General Giap.
On one side, the professional army of an old imperial power, armed with all kinds of modern weapons, aircrafts, warships, artillery, machine guns. On our side, we have just ordinary people, armed with simple weapons, but who are determined to fight to the bitter end to defend their country.
On the surface, colonial life begins to resemble pre-war affluence for the French residents. But for many young Vietnamese, a stark choice is beginning to rear its head. Nguyen Xuan Phuong lives in Saigon.
We wanted to shake off French rule. We enjoyed the kind of life they offered, but we didn't like them on our back. In the late 40s, there was agitation in the Vietnamese schools. The students were circulating photographs of Ho Chi Minh side by side with Lenin and Marx. And I was one of them, and I got caught. My father was conned and I was expelled. He took me home and spanked me a lot. "Why do you do these things? Don't do these things." Somehow he got me back into school. But my uncles went north and joined the Viet Minh. They stayed there but kept in touch through the family. They were up there but we were down south. So each side had its own way of life, I suppose. Most of us didn't make a conscious act of choosing. You were caught in a certain situation. You remained there and you responded to circumstances.
Although Giap's tactics gradually erode French control in the countryside, its weapons still possess frightening power. Ngo Van Chu, a Viet Minh officer at the Battle of VinhIen, January 17th, 1951.
Our division has been under attack ever since this morning. We are forming a group of 10 elite battalions who should be able to take Vinh Yên before tomorrow. Then I hear a sound in the sky. Strange birds appear, getting bigger and bigger. Aeroplanes. I order my men to take cover from the machine guns and bombs, but the planes dive without firing. Then hell opens up before my eyes. Large egg-shaped canisters drop from the planes and immense sheets of flame, extending for hundreds of meters, strike terror in the ranks of my soldiers. This is napalm, the fire that falls from the skies.
By 1951, 100,000 Vietnamese are fighting with French forces against the Viet Minh. Saigon, spring. Nguyen Lac Hoa witnesses a military parade of the Vietnamese National Army to welcome Jean Le Tourneau, the new French High Commissioner to Indochina.
There are plenty of Vietnamese who are prepared to fight for the French. They think it's in their best interests. They have all the latest American equipment and look very impressive. Whether they will fight against fellow Vietnamese in a full-scale battle, I just don't know.
The Vietnamese army is part of a union of French forces, which includes legionnaires, paratroopers, over 40,000 African and North African troops, and almost 20,000 French officers. By 1951, 100,000 Vietnamese are fighting with French forces against the Viet Minh. March 1953, Saigon. Marshal of France Alphonse Juin and Commander of French forces in Indochina, Raoul Salan, greet US General Mark Clark, United Nations Supreme Commander in the Far East. Also present is Chief of Staff of the Vietnamese Army, Nguyen Van Hinh. General Giap.
The French are now falling in with the Americans and using their money and equipment to establish national armies. And so, France is beginning to turn over Indochina to the United States.
The United States is funding 80% of the French war effort. The Viet Minh's resources are coming directly from the Soviet Union and Mao Zedong's new communist regime in China. The Indochina War is no longer a minor skirmish between a European empire and its reluctant colonial subjects. It is becoming a global battleground. In May 1953, the French replaced General Salan with General Henri Eugène Navarre. He immediately makes a momentous decision to create a major defensive position in the northwest of Vietnam, close to the Laos border. He chooses a small settlement on the strategic route between China, Laos and Vietnam, occupied by the Thai tribesmen, who are still loyal to the French. It is called Dien Bien Phu. Navarre orders the airlift of a large force from the Gia Lam Air Base in Hanoi and Gap Ba in Haiphong. Viet Minh officer Ngo Van Chu watches as the French forces land.
We knew they were the best they had. Paratroopers, legionnaires. The battle would be hard. I realized that Dien Bien Phu would make or break us.
US-supplied B-26 bombers drop napalm on enemy positions. The French garrison below is outnumbered 4-1 by a Viet Minh army 50,000 strong, which completely encircles it. General Giat, late November 1953.
Now on, we must concentrate all our efforts on the struggle to achieve unity and the complete independence of our entire country.
Ho Chi Minh's revolutionary government introduces draconian Stalinist economic reforms and applies communist principles ruthlessly. People are mobilized for huge reconstruction programs. Saigon journalist Nguyen Lac Hoa.
Hundreds of thousands of people came south, especially anyone with land, money or status. Most of the Catholic population left as well. Uncle Ho was undoubtedly a nationalist hero, but his revolutionary government was totally ruthless. Anyone who opposed it was re-educated, which usually meant they were eliminated.
An official announcement from the government of the Democratic Republic of Vietnam, Hanoi, December 1955.
During the last 100 days, 100,000 persons belonging to all social classes have participated in the interrogation of landlords of villages surrounding the capital.
The South is also suffering widespread social upheaval and violence. Nguyen Lac Hoa.
We had our own problems in the South. Violence from competing religions and organized crime. But Diem stamped it out. He got rid of Emperor Bao Dai and made himself head of state, and with the help of the Americans, imposed his regime on the South.
It soon becomes apparent that elections agreed to in the Geneva Accords will not happen, and that the division of Vietnam at the 17th parallel will become permanent.